Hey everyone, it is June and it got hot real fast where I live, and I want to hone in on authenticity for the month of June. I have several amazing interviews lined up, excited to share with you guys, and authenticity is my word of 2024. I don't know any of you out there if you guys choose words for the new year, or if you have goals or bucket lists or how you kind of treat the new year. But back in January, I actually chose the word authenticity. And for me, I kind of journaled about it, and it's the quality of being genuine or real and true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. And I think that's kind of been coming out a lot for me lately is authenticity, and I'm very proud of myself for stepping closer and more towards authenticity for myself, being more in alignment with myself. And the guests that I have on for this month also share stories of authenticity and alignment with their true authentic self. And this week I interviewed Mint Miller. She is an amazing woman, and she also has a podcast called the betterMINT podcast, and it's about forging a better path towards a better you. And I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested. But we actually talk about her courage of leaving a marriage and what that season brought her. And I've never gone through a divorce, but how she shined light on this was so beautiful. She chose courage over comfort by leaving her marriage and replaced safety with authenticity to her true self. She said she always chose the safe path, and when she married her husband, it was safe and comforting and familiar. And she said that when she had the courage to leave her marriage, it gave her courage to do other big, uncomfortable things. And there was self-discovery and self-awareness that she had recognized through this season and act of courage. She explains that this relationship and that experience had to happen in order for her to step into her true authentic self. So please welcome Mint Miller to the podcast, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Kindred Journey Podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hey there, how are you?
Hi, Leslie. Good. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Mint, for coming on. Maybe you can share with the listeners a little bit more about yourself. I have had the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you a little bit over the last few months. So I
Yeah.
know a little bit about you, but maybe you could start off by sharing with the listeners a little bit more about who you are and maybe how your name became Mint Miller.
Yeah, sure. So I am a divorced single mom of two young girls, and I live in Massachusetts, close to the Boston area. Mint is actually my childhood nickname. And the only people that call me Mint are my family. Some people I used to work with way like 20 years ago because they got wind of my nickname, but I started a podcast, and the name of my podcast is the betterMINT podcast. And that was sort of not on purpose. And so I'm kind of going by my childhood nickname
I love that.
for that. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a divorced single mom of two young girls, and I work full time from home. This was pre-COVID. I've been working from home for about 7 years in the corporate meetings and event space. And my career has triggered my anxiety for as long as I have been in it, more than you would ever believe. And I think with that, I've really had to do a lot of self-reflection around, what do I want to do with my life? Where is my life going? And I've also done that in my personal life too. Obviously, I'm divorced. So there have been a lot of trials and tribulations and self-discovery that I'm still going through right now. But that's essentially an overview of who I am. So thanks again for having me. I
Well,
appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And
Of course.
just before we do get started, I like to start every episode letting the guests know that this is a safe space for you to share your story. This is I want you to be able to feel comfortable. It takes a lot of courage just sometimes showing up and willing to be vulnerable. So thank you for doing
I'm
that.
happy to do it. Sure.
And I appreciate you. And so please know that your story is honored and respected in this space. And if you could maybe share a season or a moment that maybe is calling you to share where you stepped into courage overcome when comfort was no longer an option in your life.
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. Like I said earlier, actually, my divorce and in my career. I guess I could, depending on how much time we have, I could talk about both of them, but I'll start with my divorce. I met my boyfriend at the time when I was 23. We're both 23, and he is an amazing guy. Funny, kind, easygoing, and me as a very, very much a type A, high-strung person. We complement each other really well. The relationships I had before him were pretty tumultuous. And so the second I met him, I was drawn to him because he was just the opposite of what I had dealt with before. And so we started dating when we were 23, and we were together ever since. It became serious pretty quickly. And I think about maybe after 3 years or so, we ended up moving in together. And then maybe, I don't even remember the time frame, maybe a few years after that, we got engaged. And I think it was between the time we started dating and when we got married, it was like a span of 5.5 years. But we started living together in the middle of that, got married. Where we lived together, it was a condo that I owned with my brother. We wanted a house in the suburbs, and my condo was in the city. So we ended up moving. We actually moved in with my parents for a little while I rented out the condo, and we were looking to buy a house. So that was interesting. But we kind of did what every couple does. We ended up buying a house. We had a baby, a little girl, and we were just in the thick of it. I think everybody on here who are parents know what it means to be in the thick of it. You are, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
And you're about to be in the thick of it again.
Yes.
So after my first daughter was born, that first year is hard. And what's even harder is going back to work full time. And at that time, I was commuting into the city, and so was my husband. And that was horrible. Dropping my daughter off at daycare at 6:30 in the morning and not getting home to see her until 6 o'clock at night was awful. And it's so funny, even back then, I would pass all the moms at the bus stop in the morning on my way into work. And I think to myself, that is never going to be me. And it was so awful and trying and hard. And I would cry to my husband, and he's like, we ended up buying a house in a different town when my daughter was about 2.5. And we actually snagged one of the teachers at my daughter's daycare because I was pregnant with number 2 at that time. And the cost to send 2 girls to daycare was astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up taking one of the teachers and she became our nanny full time. And for us, for 2 kids, she was less expensive than, throwing her into daycare. And so that we had our second baby and we had this nanny who was wonderful. And I ended up I think it was like right after I had my daughter, maybe 3 months after I had my second, I got a remote job working from home. I mean, there was a little travel involved, but it was working at an agency, meetings and events agency. And that was a game changer for me. Because I could still nurse my baby while working, because we had the nanny for both kids and I didn't miss as much. And it was so much better. But it was still work and still triggering my anxiety. But there was also, when you become first-time parents, there's also your marriage that you have to look at. And, oftentimes, at least oftentimes your marriage is put second to your new kids. And, you have to deal with your career because you need your money, you need your income, and you have to deal with your kids because they rely on you and you're their parents. And very much your relationship kind of gets put on the back burner. And, I'm a firm believer that the universe puts in front of you the same challenges over and over and over again until you actually listen and change it. And ever since I met my husband, boyfriend at the time, that's what the universe was doing. There was something missing in our relationship that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But because he was that reliable, stand-up, funny, amazing guy, and don't get me wrong, we fought, but it wasn't like my previous relationships in terms of fighting. It was healthy, it was normal, it was forgiveness, it was quick repair. So all in all, I had a really good marriage, but there was always that something missing.
Mm.
And I always shoved it in the back of my mind, and I'm just like, it's just not important. Whatever it is that's missing, it's just not important. And I was like, it was almost like I wasn't sure if the chemistry was there from the beginning. It was hard for me to kind of determine, and I'm just like, this is marriage. This is how it's supposed to be. It's not perfect. And even if it is the chemistry, like when we're 80 and we're sitting on our front porch sipping lemonade, we're going to have so many things to talk about and laugh about. That's all that matters. But as the fog lifted after my second daughter was born, when she turns 1.5, you're less in the fog, like that new mom fog. The universe kept like poking at me, or at least my gut, my intuition, whatever you want to call it. And it was so prevalent that I had to listen to it. I couldn't ignore it. And I got kind of depressed because I loved my husband. I loved our family. My parents are divorced, and I swore I would never in my life put my kids through what my parents put my brothers and I through. And so nothing was more important than that, with the exception of this nagging feeling that just wouldn't go away. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And while I loved my husband, I wasn't sure if it was the type of love that you're supposed to have in a marriage. I just questioned that. And so I got really depressed. I lost a ton of weight. When I get depressed, I lose weight. I can't eat, sleep. All I want to do is sleep. And it's just like, I don't know if it's just my body. This is the way my body reacts.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. The girls were asleep. And he asked me, like, are you okay? you look really great. You lost like a ton of weight. I didn't have a lot of weight to lose to begin with, but the baby weight was probably still there. He's like, you're like all of a sudden like in great shape and you just seem distant.
Mm.
And I just said to him, I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking to myself, I need to face this. And I just said, you know, I just, I don't know what it is. I just don't know if I'm happy. And I don't know why. And he said, okay. And we were sort of talking about it a little bit. And I just said, look, let me find a therapist to talk to and, see what happens there. And so I started seeing a therapist and I shit you not. Is it okay if I swear? I'm
You're
sorry.
fine. Yeah, no, you're fine.
I shit you not. My therapist had the same exact story as me, but 10 years earlier.
Mm.
So she too married her best friend. She too wasn't sure if the chemistry was really there. She had 3 kids, twins and another, I think a boy. And literally we were living parallel lives, just 10 years apart. It was the most bizarre thing. And she really understood my situation where I really thought nobody else could understand it because there was nothing on the surface wrong with our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, and I'm thinking to myself, if this doesn't work out, like people are going to think I'm nuts. Like, because again, like we would hear stories about our friends and the couples, and I can't believe they've lasted or they're going to get divorced in 5 years, but never us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were always the fun couple because we always had fun together and fun with our friends. And it was just a really challenging realization to have to come to terms with. And so my therapist really helped me through this. And she helped me and my husband find a couples therapist. And we ended up going to see a couples therapist. And I think we had an aha moment where, he would have stayed married for the long haul. This is what he wanted. This is his life. He was happy. And so it was just really hard for me because I was taking, we're trying everything we can. But I felt like it was all me and I felt like it was all my fault. And I'm basically like causing all this turmoil for us as a couple and for our little girls. And so we went to couples therapy. We went to several sessions. But in one of the last sessions, she essentially asked us, what is it about not being together that concerns you or that worries you? And I'm sitting there, the girls. He's like, the money. We're talking about anything and everything that has nothing to do with each other or losing each other. And actually, it's funny because it's not really funny, but it's ironic. On our way to this session, my husband had said to me, I kind of had an aha moment. He was meditating, I guess. And in that meditation, he had some sort of like clarity, he said, where he said that his life was always lived through, it was all of the decisions he made were made from fear.
Hmm.
And he, in this meditation, whatever it was he did, he said that for the very first time, he was able to not think about any kind of fear in his life and think about what it was about our relationship without fear. Like what was right in our relationship? Like, what was the right thing to do? Taking fear completely out of the picture. And his gut said that not being together was the right thing. And that gave me the biggest sense of relief, because then maybe it wasn't all my fault. But none of this would have happened if I didn't, if this nagging feeling didn't come up in the first place. So that gave me a sense of relief. But then we walk into the therapist's office and, she asked that question, and everything that we had come up with had nothing to do with losing each other or not having each other. And that was our answer. And it was awful. I could have continued to push that nagging feeling aside and lived my life with that big component missing. But I also felt like if I didn't say anything or I didn't address this, it wasn't just me that I was doing a disservice for. My husband deserved to be loved by somebody in a way that I don't think I could have. And that was heartbreaking, because he deserved the world. Sorry.
Okay.
So, that just changed the trajectory of our life. And I had to choose courage over comfort. I would have, it's interesting, like after I got divorced and the whole dating life, it's like, I say to myself, if I wanted X, Y, or Z, I would have stayed married. So I've had to put really strong boundaries in place in terms of my dating life and in general. But it's funny because I kept seeing myself, going back to the same pattern and in ways choosing to date someone who was kind of back into that same pattern of safety, and I knew I couldn't, why, if I was going to do that, then I would have stayed married, and so I think it's been a huge learning lesson for me, in continuing to choose courage, because, I think also, I think I said at the beginning of this podcast, like my job triggers my anxiety. I always thought I was just an anxious person. But I did a lot of in the last year or so, a lot of childhood trauma healing work. And I realized I'm not an anxious person. It's just my nervous system has been programmed to react a certain way as almost like a survival mechanism. So if things trigger me, I react in a way as though I'm back to being a kid. And I think when it comes to my life and my anxiety and addressing my triggers, I think a big piece of the decisions I make is me really reprogramming my nervous system. And so if I were to continue down the path of doing something that was safe, that's me kind of like not allowing me to feel the feelings that I should be feeling and truly addressing them in a way that I should, and reprogramming my nervous system to respond instead of react, and not avoiding it altogether so we don't have to deal with it at all. So that's really the story in a nutshell. It was a very short version of the story, but that is definitely a time where I chose courage over comfort. And it was probably one of the worst times in my life.
Was it that counseling session that you guys had? Is that kind of when you both, and after his meditation, that you both knew that this is the right, what you both needed from this?
Yeah. Again, I still think that he would have stayed married. And, I remember him even saying, like, to me, I can't believe this. My life is over. I'm going to end up in a shitty apartment. I have everything I want. I have a wife, I have a family, I have a beautiful house in a beautiful town, great job, great career, and that's all coming crashing. That's all going to come crashing down. And I'm going to be this single, depressed, middle-aged guy in an apartment on my own. And I'm like, that was horrible to hear. But I think he did realize that he did make decisions based on fear. I didn't know that until he told me that. But it did force us to really do some inner work and self-reflection and what will make us happy and what do we want, what do we need.
Well, I mean, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that story, because I know it wasn't, easy for you, but yes, from the beginning of listening to that intuition in your gut and choosing that courage of following that versus suppressing it and continuing to ignore it. You kept saying that something was missing, and you knew what something was missing. Have you been able to, through divorce, dating, I don't know what your life is like right now, romantically, but can you identify what was missing?
Yeah, I think from the beginning I chose safe. And I think it was really that true chemistry that you should have in a romantic relationship. Now, my husband, I didn't consider him a brother at all, but, I have 3 brothers and I don't need another one. And I'm not saying that he was more like a brother to me, but it was that piece of it in our marriage and relationship that I finally established that's what it was. Like, you should be able to have safe, you should be able to have friendship in a marriage, but you should also be able to have that lust and chemistry, and you can have it all. You don't have to give something up in order to have something, the other thing. But I think, and I didn't do my trauma healing work until the last year. My divorce was back in 2019, and we were dealing with it since before that. So I didn't recognize this until after. But I chose safe because I didn't feel safe basically my entire life, in certain ways. And that's what was most important to me at the time. But I think had I not gotten divorced, I don't think I would ever have recognized that I needed to do some sort of childhood trauma healing. It was actually in my current relationship now where I realized that. Because my boyfriend now of 3.5 years has had a lot of his own childhood trauma, and we have seen a counselor. No relationship is perfect. And in our sessions with our counselor, certain things that he reacts to, like a big reaction, is not something that like someone without his trauma would react in that way. And so she had said, that's a trauma response. And I'm sitting there like, what's a trauma response? Like, she would say that to him. I'm like, what the heck is a trauma response? And she said it was basically, again, like when your nervous system is programmed in a certain way, it's like a survival mechanism. So like, let's say when you were little, I don't know, it could be anything. Something traumatic happened to you. Like, I don't know, some people's parents leave and never come back. They abandon them. And so you react in a certain way to kind of cope with those things. And so if something triggered you, like let's say you have an abandonment issues, and I'm not saying he does, I'm just giving an example, kind of arbitrary. But if, if there's a fear in your adult life of abandonment, your nervous system says, oh my God, danger, danger, danger. And you react in a way that worked for you to protect yourself as a child, but that no longer works for you as an adult. And so he had to recognize when that was happening. His triggers were reminding him of things that happened to him as a kid. Something small could, generate this big response or, reaction. And so it was actually him who did this childhood trauma healing intensive before I did. And it was like night and day when he'd actually went through it twice. And I did it once in between his 2 weekends, and it was eye-opening. I always thought to myself, oh, I had a pretty good childhood, like kind of normal. But in doing all that trauma healing work, I'm like, nope, did not have a normal childhood. But it made me recognize, like, oh my God, I'm not an anxious person. This is just how I've always had to feel either good and perfect and have control over everything. And I was sort of like more of a parentified child growing up, trying to control everything and trying to make sure everything's in line and everybody around me was okay. And then in my, teenage years, my, excuse me, my, the aggressive combative teenager would come out. So when I react to something that I know is a trauma response, I know how old I am essentially when I'm reacting. So if I start to argue with you and like get defensive, that's me as a teenager.
Interesting.
If I start to cry and like feel helpless, that's me as like 6-year-old. So that was very interesting and eye-opening. And so I've had to do a lot of work and still have to do a lot of work to kind of navigate that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I had no idea either what that is. So thank you for
Yeah, sure.
the brief introduction of what
Yeah.
that is. You said that your job has triggered your anxiety, but realized that it's actually how your nervous system has been wired
Yeah.
from childhood. Were there any kind of triggers in your marriage that like you said, you chose safety,
Yeah.
you didn't
Yeah.
want to get divorced because you came, your parents were divorced. I didn't want to do that to my girls. I mean, right there in itself takes courage to choose yourself because you're the
Yeah.
foundation for your girls, your family,
Yeah.
so that takes courage to, even though you don't want to put others through discomfort, it was what you and your husband at the time needed to do for you both as individuals.
Yeah. 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 And I think, my parents were together for 13 years before they got a divorce, and they should have been divorced much sooner. So I know what it's like to live in a family that's unhappy. And so, but also it's like, what am I showing my children by giving up a big part of myself by staying married? What lesson am I showing my girls that you have to give up happiness in order to have, in order to appease everybody else? Like that's not a life to live either. And that's not an example I want to set.
Yeah.
So I knew that eventually my girls will be old enough to ask me what happened. And as much as it hurts me to talk about, because you don't get married expecting this to happen ever.
Right.
But as much, I wanted to show them that I did what was best. And, eventually I'll tell them the full story. They're too young to really understand. So I just say, you know what, Dad and I are just better, so much better as friends than as being married. I mean, right now we get along great. It's not like anybody cheated. It's not like anyone did something to the other. So there's nothing combative or there's no resentment. Like a lot of divorced couples, somebody cheated or somebody did something so bad and you're just mad and angry at the other. And it makes for a very hard and challenging co-parenting relationship. But I feel very fortunate that my ex-husband and I were able to handle this as mature adults and really come to terms with what would actually make us happy. And he lives at the end of my street. We're very good friends. You know, there's nothing contentious about our relationship. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. I'm going to tell you that, of course, but we both realize that it doesn't have to be a bad relationship, especially if we have two kids together.
Mm.
It's really important for us to show that even though you're not married, you can still be kind to the other for the betterment of your family and your kids. It's so important. My sister-in-law is a therapist, and she says to me all the time, like, you and your ex-husband are like the staple co-parenting, you know, you're the ideal co-parenting relationship, like the poster child for co-parenting. And it's just a choice that we make, but it's also, I don't know, we've been able to, we've always respected each other. So I think that's kind of helped us pave the right path for us. But I know not everybody can have that, you know?
Well, I think that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a friend who co-parents very beautiful with her ex-husband as well. And yeah, it's not always rainbows and unicorns and it's
No.
not always easy, but to see the beauty of what that family looks like, that family
Yeah.
dynamic looks like now, like you're saying, you can still be kind, you can still be respectful for
Right.
the betterment. I like how you did that.
I didn't do it on purpose, though. I was like, oh, I honestly didn't do it on purpose.
I caught on of what your new family looks like, and
Yeah.
you sharing that for your girls and leading by example for your girls in that space versus of resentment of staying stuck in a marriage that is not loving, like you said, you saw what it was like
Yeah.
for your parents. So I commend you for that. That takes
Thank you.
a huge amount of courage and to show up as better people
Yeah.
for each other and for your daughters as well. So
Yeah.
that is very beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Sure.
I think, just one other thing, that not that we have time to dig into, gosh, you have so many stories, but I think for you sharing that you're not an anxious person, even though that's what you were identifying it as.
Yeah.
I
My
think
whole life. Yeah.
your whole life and taking the time, maybe if you want to just, if you can dive into that a little bit as far as maybe some of the emotions that you've experienced through this season that you shared, and maybe going through the the nervous system reset. Like, do any emotions kind of come to mind of how you felt, what you were experiencing through? I mean, obviously, probably sadness and grief and loss,
Yeah.
but I'm sure. Are you happy now? Because you said that's kind of what was missing, I guess, is that maybe you can kind of just share like through this season and maybe into now how emotions have how you've navigated those.
Yeah. So it's interesting because had I not had the courage to face that and end my marriage, I wouldn't have the courage to do other things in my life that I know solicits big change. And so I didn't recognize any of that while I was going through my divorce or while I was getting a divorce or even shortly after my divorce. There are certain things that would happen when I was married. Like we would be painting the walls in our new house, and he would get paint on the ceiling, like a drop of paint on the ceiling from the brush, and I would freak out, like a big reaction like that. And I did talk to my psychiatrist at the time about it, and he's like, well, have you ever thought that like this is the first time like you're creating a family of your own and you never really had something solid? Like I had a solid family, but it wasn't like one roof, it was multiple roofs, two different roofs. And it was just like you're reacting and you just want to protect it. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. But now, I'm recognizing that in my divorce and through all of my self-discovery and self-awareness, God, there are so many things that I've had to face and tackle since now that I've recognized what it is. So oftentimes what happens is like it's more of a reaction in my body. So if I'm anxious about something, I'll get like sick to my stomach. Like, super stressed, and it's oftentimes in my stomach. Sometimes like I really have to pay attention to like how I feel physically. Sometimes it's in my throat and in around my neck and shoulders. And like I'll be like this, like when I'm working, like my shoulders will be shrugged and I'm super anxious. Like work triggers me big time. And I think there's so many reasons for that. But so what I've had to do is recognize that in the moment, and it's really hard to do. Because before I would never recognize it and I would literally react. I'd be like, I would either like start just being argumentative or, being snippy or snapping or whatever it might be. And instead, I need to literally recognize the physical symptoms before the reaction comes out. It's very, very hard to do, and it takes a lot of practice. I'm still trying to get better at it. I mean, I am better, but it's not something that just happens and you're better and you're fine. So it's really recognizing that and being able to like even just like go in another room and sit down for 5 minutes and do kind of like a check-in with myself. Like, what is coming up for me? Why am I feeling like this? The only thing that happened was, something simple, and like not a normal person wouldn't be like frustrated or triggered by it, And so it's like, why? Like, let me give you an example. I have a podcast like you do, and and I was kind of stressing about, do I keep the free version of Zoom when doing recordings or do I pay for the full one? And my boyfriend was like, Michelle, I will pay for for the full version of Zoom for you. I got so reactive because of something like I was just like feeling super anxious, and I was like, like the past Michelle would have been like, no, I don't want your help, or something snippy like that. But instead, I'm like, you know what? Like, I really appreciate that something's coming up for me and I need to kind of sort it out. Once I do, I'll let you know, but I need to sort it out for myself. And I realized it was like certain things that happened when I was a kid. Like, I didn't want, like, I'm very, very hypersensitive to supporting myself. And I have always been that way financially. And I don't ever want to borrow anything from anyone because I don't want to have to owe anyone anything. And so, and I don't know if that has anything to do with like, seeing my, sometimes my dad somewhat controlling my mom with money. Because that was just kind of what he did. I don't even know if he did it I don't think he did it on purpose, but I could see it all. And so like I get hypersensitive to that because, I don't want anyone to feel, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want anyone to have that kind of control over me. And like, while I know my boyfriend wasn't doing that, that's what came up for me because of past trauma. So I've really had to like sit back, think about what it is that was coming up because I couldn't identify it in the moment, but I also knew something was coming up. And before I reacted in a negative way, I needed to like almost reparent myself and talk to myself and be like, Michelle, it's okay. You got this. You're safe. Nobody's controlling you. Nobody's gonna, hang anything over your head. And it's really like, oh, okay. So it's almost like telling your nervous system to just ease up. You're not in the same position you were in, 30 years ago or however many years ago. So that's kind of how like the tools I've used through all that. And yeah, I think that's really, it's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress, big time.
We all are.
Yeah, I know. It's hard though.
It is. And thank you for sharing all of that. I know it wasn't easy. And you and your ex-husband both for having the courage to show up for yourselves and
Yeah,
make
thank you.
and said that he made all the decisions he had and that he had made in life were from fear.
Yeah.
And he had the fear of being a single, depressed, divorced. Is that the case? I mean, you don't have to share
No.
his story, like, but you know, that's where
Yeah.
our minds go. Like, oh, my life is
Yeah.
over. I'm this
Yeah.
is going to end me. But it looks like you're doing well, you know, after
Yeah.
divorce, and sounds like you have a great co-parenting relationship. And
We do. He lives at the end of my street in a beautiful home. He is in a relationship. He's happy. So
good.
if he's happy, that makes me happy.
Well, good. I'm
Yeah.
happy for both of you. And
Thank you.
thank you again for sharing your beautiful, you know, beautiful story. It is
Thank you.
beautiful in a way. And I appreciate you expressing what you've been learning. And like you said, we're all work in progress, but
Yeah, we are.
we're all human. So
Yeah.
hindsight 2020, what would you have told your old self before stepping into that season of courage? Like you said, it started kind of with a intuitive feeling that you
Yeah.
had. What would you have told yourself when it was scary to step into that moment, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what I know now, that had to happen, that relationship had to happen. My marriage had to happen in order for me to really find who I truly am and really step into my authentic self. Because had that not happened, I wouldn't be setting the boundaries in my job that I am. I've really recognized that there's a lot of work that I've had to do on myself as it pertains to my career. Because it's not fulfilling me. It has nothing to do with my purpose. It's not aligning. And I've had to do, because I faced that, I have been able to do so much self-discovery, and that you just have to trust in your intuition, trust in the process, and honestly trust in the universe to show you the way, because it will work out. And there are going to be many seasons of uncertainty throughout the journey and the path, even after, in my situation, divorce. But you needed to go through that to get through what was to come, and to prepare myself for what was to come. Because my anxiety now, it's being triggered at work, and I need to understand why. And it's, I'm not my career is just, like I said, not aligned with my values or my passion or what I want my overall purpose to be. So I had to go through all of that in order for me to address this, which is really my next chapter in my life.
Well, I think all of those are very beautiful things that you just shared, and great reminders for you to carry into this new season of uncertainty, and to know that you have to trust in your intuition and trust in yourself. So I think it's not just wonderful advice for the listeners, but for you moving forward into this next season of courage that you're literally in right now.
Yeah. And I've learned, through all this, what you don't change, you choose. And that has resonated with me so much right now, especially in this season of my life. And so if you're not going to change something that you know isn't right for you, you're choosing it. And that's on you. So,
that's some radical responsibility right there.
It is. It really is. And that causes you to choose courage over comfort every time.
Absolutely. Because sometimes if you choose the comfort, it's still going to be uncomfortable, or it still could be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's like, choose your hard.
Hmm. Yeah,
Your
exactly.
anxiety of working in a profession that you hate is soul sucking and is stripping your time away from your children, or the uncomfortableness of what happens if you go to it through and go down an uncertain path, but will fulfill you.
Mhm.
They're both uncomfortable. It's
Just
just which
choose.
one is, are you more, what's more palpable?
Yeah. What
for you?
discomfort are you willing to sit with?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, Mint, thank you so much for this wonderful hour that we've had together. I've got so many wonderful takeaways from this, and
Good.
not that I've experienced a divorce, but I have people in my life that have, and
Yeah.
love them dearly. And I think all of this is so, like I said, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, messy life that we all live.
Yeah,
And
isn't it? It
thank you
is.
so much. If you
Mhm.
could, I know you're on a podcast endeavor as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and if you want to share where the listeners could find you, that would be
Sure.
fantastic.
So my podcast is not yet launched.
Okay.
I am either thinking about doing it by December 31st, 2023 or early January. I just have to choose courage over comfort and do it. Take the action. So it's coming soon, and it's called the betterMINT podcast. So BETTERMINT. And it's really to help those who feel stuck to forge a path towards a better you. So I'm very excited about it. I think many people will get a lot out of it. There's a lot of messages that kind of cross over. A lot of people I've interviewed have been in a corporate career who have realized it's not in alignment with them, and they've chosen a different path. So in line with kind of you choosing courage over comfort, and how they, their stories of how they took the leap and had that courage. And it's been very profound and eye-opening for me. So more to come. I'm excited about it.
I love that. Well, it will be launched by the time that this launches, because
Great.
we are launching in the new year. So we'll
Okay.
be
Cool.
sure to have this shared and added to all the
Awesome.
platforms. And
Yeah, and I'm on Instagram. It's at betterMINT Podcast, or Facebook group is betterMINT Podcast. So
great.
Come join
Awesome.
us.
Well, thank you, Mint, very much for your time. I appreciate you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Leslie. You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast, and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.